Welcome to Lavender Recap. In today's video, we'll be going through a drama and American thriller movie from the year 2019 titled Dreamland. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. The movie opens with a voiceover from Eugene Evans' half-sister, Phoebe Evans, reflecting on events that occurred 20 years before, in 1930. She was a small child at the time. She's telling the entire story of the film. To begin, she claims that the beginning of the story is the first thing that people get incorrect. It wasn't the Wells lady who started it. It all began with the arrival of the first train full of homesteaders. John, Olivia, and Eugene Baker were among the heartbroken and terrified people that landed on Bismarck, Texas on that fateful day. On a commitment, the Bakers had relocated their family to the Great Plains, a promise that suddenly appeared to be as rotten as the ground they were standing on. They prayed for rain and built a fresh life from the ground up. John, on the other hand, was not convinced. This place he believed was cursed in some way. John's drinking worsened throughout the years, and he grew increasingly paranoid. His imagination was filled with ideas of a different existence, where he could once again live in God's grace. Eugene's father died unexpectedly when he was 5 years old. He was left with a void that would follow him for the rest of his life. Eugene only received one postcard from his father in his entire life. In it, John claimed to have discovered God's eye on the Gulf Coast of Mexico, which he described as the most beautiful area on earth. Olivia moved quickly to meet Eugene's needs, marrying George Evans, a county deputy, and a farmer who's also Phoebe's father a year later. But Eugene's thoughts on John Baker and the world he wrote about were never far from his thoughts. He was curious as to what his father had discovered out there. When Eugene was 17, though, something else drew his interest. For that matter, all of theirs. The terrain turned against them just as John had predicted. In the first year, Bismarck was battered by 14 storms. There was a group of families who had lost their wheat crops, corn crops, and were virtually starving. The more they attempted to restart, the worse things became. Bismarck was pursued by the banks. Getting to the story of what happened to Eugene, on the street, we observe Eugene and his best friend Joseph plotting to steal apples and magazines. Eugene had always loved detective stories since he was a child. He had a keen interest and love for them. A town meeting is held one day, and the sheriff displays a wanted poster for Allison Wells, who is sought for $10,000 for robbing a bank and killing a 9-year-old girl. At the scene, 4 additional persons were killed. People should not engage Allison if they see her because she will not hesitate to kill other people, according to the sheriff. The woman is being sought by half of Texas law enforcement. Eugene and Joseph plan to track her down. Olivia, his mother, is seen with a little daughter, Phoebe Evans, the narrator of our story. Olivia is worried about her son going to the search party, so she tells him to stay careful and come home before it gets dark. She had no idea how things between her son and the robber, Allison, would turn out. Eugene goes to the barn to read later. He finds bleeding bandages and dressing on the barn floor, as well as a woman brandishing a gun and ordering him not to scream or make any noise. Eugene and Allison strike a pact after seeing her on the wanted poster. Allison will tell him what occurred if he cleans the wounds caused by the shooting in her leg. Eugene cleans her wound despite the fact that the bleeding was too much for him to bear. He's the one who does the dressing. Allison had lost her own family and farm in Missouri a year prior, as fate would have it. Both her mother and father had died of pneumonia. Phoebe continues her story by noting that she has no intention of portraying Allison Wells as a liar, as others have done. But Allison clearly understood her audience and told her story accordingly. Allison gives Eugene the revolver to gain his trust. She explains herself if she were the main character in the story. She became an outlaw after her farm was confiscated and her family died. It was her only way of getting anything back that led her to the bank heist in Guthrie Plains. It was her 4th heist that month, but it was the first one that resulted in a fatality or serious injury. When she was stealing a bank, the cops had no problems firing into an unsuspecting crowd, killing a young girl with a stray bullet. Allison was shot in the leg after being shocked by the killing and then fled in a car. Eugene believes Allison's account and tells her she can stay at the barn for as long as she wishes. Allison informs Eugene that if he helps her get a car to Mexico, she will pay him $20,000, and she asks him to obtain her a car so she can flee. Eugene inquires if she has that much cash on her person, to which she responds that she knows her way around a bank, even one in Mexico. She was planning yet another bank robbery. Eugene agreed since he needed the money. Eugene is spying on Allison, and Phoebe asks him what he's looking at. He informs her that there are several dead dogs in the barn. She refuses to believe him and enters the barn, only to flee when she sees bloodied rags. Eugene informs Joseph that he has met someone who wants to buy Joseph's family's automobile. The request is denied by Joseph. When Eugene returns to the barn, he is greeted by an agitated Allison who claims she's feeling trapped and needs to leave this place. Eugene takes her to a local watering hole for a swim. The two flee naked back to the farm, almost getting apprehended by the property owner. Eugene overhears George discussing evidence against Allison at the police station at the local dance. Eugene breaks into the evidence room with his stepfather's keys and discovers images of the crime scene. Dead persons were depicted in the photographs. He discovers Allison lied and forgot to reveal Perry, the assailant who murdered people. Perry and Allison were partners in the bank robbery. Both were shot while fleeing the cops and Perry died. Meanwhile, Eugene is talking with his sister Phoebe, and Phoebe admits that she's aware of Eugene's decision to give Allison shelter. She also states that she will not notify anyone unless he explains why he has been acting strangely lately. Eugene thinks it's complicated, implying that Phoebe isn't old enough. However, he gives her a promise that everything will be well. George finds a ripped material from Allison's dress and takes it to the sheriff as proof of her presence. George is fired by the sheriff, who believes he handed Eugene the keys to obtaining evidence that Eugene burned. George becomes enraged and returns to the property. Eugene confronts Allison, claiming that he's aware of Perry's whereabouts and that she has lied to him. Allison tries to persuade Eugene by claiming that talking about Perry is too difficult and that she hinted at him being her lover. Eugene claims that he's jealous of Perry's discovery. Perry died in Allison's hand is the actual story. Meanwhile, George confronts Eugene and informs him that they may be forced to leave their home. George smacks Eugene in the face, claiming that he doesn't know enough about the story to declare Allison innocent. Eugene had a conversation with his mother. They discuss Eugene's biological father, John Baker. He inquires of his mother about George's claim that John has died. Yes, she says. She recalls his father's letter to him when he was 6 years old. She also claims that his father sent more postcards, which she destroyed. The letter stopped after 5 years, and she believes that when John died. Eugene refuses to believe her and retires to his bed. Eugene wants to travel to Mexico later, and before he does, he speaks with his younger sister Phoebe. He informs him that he will be departing for Mexico. Phoebe implores him to stay. When he refuses to stay, he declares that she will study Spanish and accompany him to Mexico. Eugene advises her to stay with the family and that he will send them money regularly. It's morning, and George discovers that Eugene and the truck have vanished. Eugene eloped with Allison, the fugitive, Phoebe informs her mother. Meanwhile, Eugene and Allison are seen driving away from town in the family truck. Allison believes Eugene came to see her because he loves her, but she tells him she doesn't love him back and plans to travel alone. Eugene reminds her that his father is in Mexico, and this is his opportunity to track him down. They stop at a hotel for a rest. Allison takes a shower and invites Eugene in, which leads to intercourse between the two of them. They rob a bank the next morning since they're short of cash. When Allison raids the tellers, Eugene keeps the customer hostage. One of the hostages takes advantage of a small pause to fire at Allison. Eugene kills the man with a single shot to the head. They're on their way out. Eugene requests they stop over as they drive down the road. They do, and Allison begs him to return to the car as he walks into the woods. Eugene's sister Phoebe is hiding in the backseat, and George and a small posse are on their tail. Allison and Eugene each confess to each other their wrongdoings. Allison embraces him and tells him that they may start a new life together by baptizing themselves in the ocean. George fires a shot at Allison as they rush back to the car. Eugene kneels beside her as she dies. As Eugene fires a shot into George's leg, George orders his soldiers to lay down their weapons. George instructs his guys to avoid firing at Eugene. Phoebe yells at him to get out of here. Eugene dashes to his pickup and accelerates away. The family never saw Eugene again, according to Phoebe, who's narrating the entire incident. Did you enjoy this movie? Let's know your favorite scenes in the comments below.